Welcome back to Berlin, Germany, stage for the LEC playoffs. Today we're closing out round one as Mad Lions and Rogue fight for the right to challenge G2 Esports earlier today. Players arriving to the studio, and again, it's been 2 days already, but I have to say it a third time. So good to have them back. Now, both teams ended top 3 in the regular season, setting the stage for a great battle in today's best of 5 series. I'm Drakos, joined now by none other than Vedius and Dylan Falco. Welcome, Dylan. It's good to have you. Bittersweet, I imagine, after yesterday's series, but how are you today? We'll worry about the Schalke boys later, but how are you, coach of Schalke, feeling?
Well, I'll be honest, yesterday was a bit of a heartbreaker, taking G2 to Game 5 in such a close series and like almost winning. But I think overall, me and the team are pretty happy with our performance yesterday. We still are alive in the losers bracket, and I think if we play like we did yesterday, I think we'll have pretty good chances.
That's what I like to hear. Vedius.
Yes.
Dylan just said it was a heartbreaker. I'm going to make him talk about it. I'm going to make you talk about it anyway, because it was also a banger, Dylan.
It was also
a
a
heartbreaker for you. It was an absolute banger.
We had outplays. We had no one using Smite, apparently. We had insane ults.
There were misplays.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was great to watch. It must have been very difficult as a coach to watch like live. I remember you telling us the comms was chaotic, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially in Game 4 and 5, when there's these Baron steals and Smite steals and pentakills and all these things going off. It was an absolutely crazy series.
Yeah, and I think you look at it, obviously, like some really big standout performances across the board.
This one,
fantastic moments. And, you know, these are some of the questionable moments where, like, where were the smites? Like, you know, great job Abadage on the one hand, but every outplay might also be a misplay in some circumstances. But I think we had a lot of step-up performances on both sides of the board, but highlighting Schalke here, I think Abadage had some fantastic moments. The Darius was very exciting to see. People are going to remember Broken Blade's pentakill, but Limit is the player that really stood out to me, and I know stood out to Vedius because he couldn't stop preaching about how great this man's Alistar was.
But it was just so good. I think that we saw during the regular season how impactful Limit as a player can be. I was really impressed with things like his Gragas during the regular season. You guys were one of the early adopters of the Rel as well, and it feels like that pretty much at every stage of the split, Limit has just found ways to get these crazy engages off. And Kadro and I were talking about how difficult it would be for them to get this engage, and then he just goes and gets it. Like, he had a fantastic performance yesterday. I was really impressed.
I think in both like the regular season and in our series yesterday, Limit has really stood out as one of the, if not like the best engaged support in the league. And I think it's often in competitive play, like you look at these team fights and you see the carries picking up the pentakills and all these kills, but it's nice to see someone highlighted, that person that's actually making these fights happen, and I think Limit did a really good job with this.
We do love our engaged supports here in EU. It's hard not to. You know, there's a lot of strong names to stand alongside Limit in that category. Of course, G2 ultimately do take the win. Moving on to the winners bracket, they will face the winner of today's match next week. That said, Schalke moving down as they are the lowest seed. We do already know that you guys are going to be facing Fnatic. Dylan, initial thoughts? I don't want you to give too much away. I know there's a lot of prep ahead of you this weekend, but how are you feeling about that series?
So I was a bit surprised looking at Fnatic's first playoff set. Their regular season was very, very crazy games. They played a lot of very aggressive picks, aggressive counter picks, a lot of kills and a lot of deaths in the Fnatic games. But although the games themselves were a bit wild, I think Fnatic's drafts and preparation was a bit more standard. They were playing a lot more standard team fighting compositions. So although I think the games will be bloody when we play them next week, I'm not too sure how the preparation will go.
Yeah, it's going to be wild to see, because I feel like your team leveled up so much across the 2 weeks it's been since we last saw them. And for Fnatic, a bit of a level up in some cases, and in other areas it did still feel like the chaotic game. Now, Vedius, this series, I know it was still 2 days ago, but obviously standout moments from Genax, standout moments from a lot of players on Fnatic to show up, to find these big turns like the shockwave that you see now on your screen from Niski. But what's your read on that series?
Well, I think that Upset very eloquently put it in PGL that Fnatic are their own worst enemy, and if Fnatic can turn down their aggression, I think that on paper, they are the favorites for me. The question is, can they actually do it? Because so far throughout the entire split, they haven't been able to. And then when you look at how Schalke approached the game, I think after yesterday's series, both Schalke and G2 will have learned a huge amount in terms of how they want to approach the drafts, what are their priority picks, and I think that we are going to see two very well-prepared teams, and ultimately it comes down to which Fnatic shows up on the day, because if they don't, I think Schalke can just steamroll over the top of them.
I mean, yeah, the thing is I'll be honest, Dylan, I was a skeptic coming in. You know, I came to the house, I saw everything that was going down, I was like, wow, the practice, everything's looking so good. Week 8, it was a good shift. I was stunned that you guys got 4th place. But after that series yesterday, like, I'm a believer. I don't want us to ruin Miracle Run, because we will if we overuse it. But I believe in Schalke, and we will need to think of something that is not Miracle Run or Caster Monologue Curse to hype your team up, because it was such a thrilling series yesterday. That said, I want to talk a little bit about the picks that we've been seeing. because there's a lot of stuff that I, as a bad League of Legends player, am getting excited about. And I need to know if I should be getting excited or if there's some context that's maybe missing. So let's take it over to studs and duds. I want to start on the Summoner's Rift. Darius, is this guy a stud or a dud? Dylan, I want to go to you first. You picked it. Is this something that you want to keep picking? Is this a pick we can expect to see more of? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, we played Darius in 3 games, actually, yesterday. I think that this champion historically has been a bit too linear and a bit too low mobility, but with the addition of Stridebreaker, and if you play this with a team comp with a lot of engage, I think it can really work well against heavy tank compositions. And I think this is kind of how we utilized it yesterday in our series.
I was very impressed with how they made it work, because as Dylan rightly says, when you look at solo queue Darius players, they always run the Ghost so that they don't have to deal with that mobility issue, and it also is very powerful in lane as well. But with things like the Stridebreaker and with compositions, I think in particular having good engage from the jungle and support really better enables him. And when you have a player like Limit who can start all those fights for you, then the Darius just kind of has to come in and clean up the fight afterwards. Saying that though, we did see a couple of flash engages. He came very close to flashing onto a Xayah. I think it was in game 4, and he nearly managed to hook him in if it wasn't for Caps' quick reaction speed. So Darius can still be a threat as long as he has his summoner spells up, and I think that we can expect to see it more. And we have to give credit to Adam from K-Corp in the LFL. He was one of the big proponents of it, brought out into the finals as well, and I imagine that we're going to see more Darius as the playoffs run through.
I certainly hope so. I never thought I would say that coming in after 2015. I was like, I'm good. I've seen enough Darius for my entire life.
Solo queue is the real loser.
Yeah, solo queue also. I'm not going to be afraid to ban that champion anytime my top laner says anything cocky at all. Like, I'm going to pick Trinity. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to ban this Darius out real quick. Make sure you're not going to feed and run it down. That said, a champion who is way more standard, something I expect to see a lot more of, but also has some of the worst playoff stats that we've seen in a long time. Xayah, the next pick I want to talk about, 0-5 right now. Now, in your series yesterday, maybe we didn't get to see as much of it. There were a lot of 80 carry bans, but is Xayah off the map? Should we be seeing less Xayah in general? Why is Xayah performing so poorly in these LEC playoffs?
I think that Xayah versus Xayah in pro play is a pretty proven matchup, and even throughout the regular season and in other regions, you see that this is a matchup that definitely can be played. I do think that the playoff sets so far have been very, very bloody, very, very fight heavy, and playing the Xayah side of this matchup when there's things like Hecarim's running around that Xayah combos very well with can be kind of tough, and I think that's a lot of the reason why the Xayah games have kind of struggled a lot. But I think with a good front-to-back draft with a more solid team fighting composition, I think Xayah can still be a very strong pick in the meta and be utilized well.
Yeah, personally, I've always had a couple question marks around Xayah, just because while I think that she can scale well, she's not one of the type of AD carries that has percentage health damage later into the game like a Xayah can. She doesn't get additional range like a Tristana does as the game progresses. While she does get additional attack speed, I've always been worried for her when you have these very standard front to back. And what I think her biggest asset was her burst damage from things like her feathers and also the self-peel that she gets from her ultimate. But when you have all these chem tank junglers running around, perma-diving, Dylan made an excellent point, which is that if you're forced to use your ultimate at the very start of the fight, then one of your biggest strengths is immediately removed before the fight is even kicked off. So yeah, I'm curious as to how her priority will shift, because I imagine leading up to this point, she's been very prevalent in scrims. She's been played a lot and she has been heavily prioritized. So there clearly has to be something that we're just not yet seeing on stage work for the champion. The question is, will the meta shift, or will pros actually be able to make her work?
And wouldn't be surprised to see more of her today. We'll see how she can perform in the series, Rogue versus Mad, but 2 more champions ahead of us. One of them, not a meme, because Vedius keeps bringing it up, and because Dylan Falco banned it yesterday, is Yone. I have to know, how much Yone is there right now in EU? Should we be seeing more of this champion? Because obviously, again, another solo queue terror that has these big outplay potential moments, but not seeing too much of it domestically right now in Europe.
So I think Yone, very, very high skill cap champion, very huge playmaking and engage potential. I think Yone is very strong with Lilia as a combination, and I think this is primarily what you see it paired with in pro play. I think earlier in the split, people were playing a lot of Yone Nidalee, but I think this is much, much weaker. I think it's also weak a bit to tanks. So again, as a lot of tank junglers are entering the meta, it can be a bit risky to be played, but I think if you get a good wombo combo, maybe pair it with a Xayah, it can be a very good pick.
Yeah.
I think Dylan summed it up nicely. I hope we get to see more Yone. I think into Orianna specifically, it can be very strong. But I want to focus more on the next champion.
I was going to say,
let's talk about the next champion.
Let's talk about the next champion. It's not the nine-tailed fox, everybody's favorite KDA member. Actually, that's probably debatable these days since the newest set of KDA.
She is the best
The
KDA
OG
member.
KDA queen. It is Ahri. Is she a stud or a dud, Vedi?
She is a stud. Okay, listen, I understand, right? I've been playing Ahri since whenever she was released, I think it was season 3. I'm an avid Ahri main, and the reality is that anyone that has played Ahri knows full well that her laning phase sucks, okay? She doesn't get priority in lane, she struggles to clear the waves, all of her abilities cost a huge amount of mana, and in order to, like, you don't have, and there's less mana in the game than there used to be. Like, Ahri as a champion really struggles when it comes to laning phase. However, with the introduction of Everfrost, and with her high mobility, I think Ahri possesses something that many mid lane champions don't have, which is pick potential and playmaking. I think that against low mobility mages, like things like Orianna, and with the amount of like frontline tanks, it's actually very easy for Ahri to find flanks, get access to the back line, and do kind of what Caps did on Twisted Fate yesterday, which is like using his ultimate to dive into the back and threaten. I think that her pick potential is very similar to that of Blitzcrank, so I think that she is a playmaker that has potential for outplay. And that's why I like her in the hands of someone like a humanoid, because of that potential.
And we're going to see. We're going to see today. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it on the positive end of the Ahri spectrum, because Dylan, I know what you have to say, and it's not nearly as positive. We'll give the fans a glimmer of hope that the Ahri can be a good thing for the team. That said, it's time to shift our focus, because 2 weeks ago, Kadril was absolutely humiliated on the LCS broadcast as he lost to Mark Z in a totally not rigged whatsoever pop quiz. Today, you gentlemen are going to get a chance to show him how it's done. We've prepared some questions about the LEC playoffs and more. And if you're at home, you're our surprise third contestant. Discord.lec.gg. You have the chance to participate as well. It is you guys at home, all of you, wherever you're coming in from, versus Dylan, Falco, and Vedius. Ooh, big challenge. So let's kick off with question number 1. Which champion was banned in all 9 LEC 2021 playoff games so far? Is it A, T, I don't know why I'm doing letters. Is it TF, is it Thresh, or Tristana? 3 T's, gentlemen. You can teach it.
I'm pretty confident I know the answer to this one.
I know the answer to this one as well.
Okay, I'm saying Thresh.
It would be Thresh, yeah.
That is correct. Is that enough time for Discord to answer? Do we need more drama? We've got 70s happy music. Okay, we're going to go. That's all right. That's 1 point for each of them. We'll see if you guys got it right at home. Which player has the highest damage per minute in LEC 2021 playoffs so far? Is it Caps, Gen X, or Niski?
Well, Caps played, I think, Corki and Azir yesterday, so I'm going to go with Caps.
Oh, but I actually think...
I don't know for the record.
Reckon it might be Niski. I reckon it might actually be Niski. I might be trolling, but I actually think it might be Niski.
What do you think it might be, or are you locking
it in?
No,
I'm locking in Niski. I'm going with
You're
Niski.
locking in Niski?
I'm
We got
gambling
one Niski, one Caps.
I reckon it might be Niski.
It's Niski.
Yeah. Only because their games were so, like, I know that they played less aggressive, but they had like 50 kills in like 3 of their 4 games. And I just feel like it's just high DPM for everyone. That's what I thought.
It's good. That's the thing you're going to forget. Next week, you know, you're playing Fnatic. There's going to be some padding of those DPM stats. You have to remember. All right, game 2 yesterday, Rekkles had 16 kills, but who has the most kills in one game in EU history? How many kills and against which team? You actually don't need to say how many kills, but Selfmade on Evelynn versus Vitality Spring 2020. That was a troll game for the record. Rekkles on Vayne versus Copenhagen Wolves Summer 2014, or Shadow on Olaf versus G2 in Spring Playoffs 2020. That was game 5 where, you know, carried to victory the first Mad Lions one. What do you guys, most kills?
I feel like Rekkles the KDA King is the obvious choice, but maybe that's actually just a bait.
That's the genius of the quiz.
Yeah.
Every time you think you know, they might be
I'm just going to go with a safe one and go Rekkles.
I think it's Selfmade on Evelynn versus Vitality. I remember casting that game, and I remember saying something along the lines of he has an insane number of kills. Yeah. I think it's Selfmade on that.
Not as insane as the KDA King, though. Safe predictions reign supreme. Are we at 2-2 or 3-3?
We're tied. We're pretty sure we're tied.
We're tied. Yeah, Question number 4. Oh, wow. We're getting deep, folks. You're an Icelandic football fan, and you want to celebrate with your national team after the game. What do? Shout out to people in Iceland. Do you put on a Viking helmet and scream, clap over your head, or run down and celebrate with the team? I'll repeat those. If you're an Icelandic football fan, what do? Do you put on a Viking helmet and scream, clap over your heads, or run into the field and celebrate with the team?
What would Evan do?
Clap over their heads?
I reckon they run onto the field.
It's clap over their heads.
Damn it! Why?
Vedius, I think what you don't appreciate is that how much of the professional coaching career is understanding the culture of where we're going to play MSI at. Dylan's qualified and prepared. I'm just saying, why haven't you done your research?
Okay, my bad.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I will know that when we go to Iceland for MSI, it's just, I understand. Got it.
I mean, at least it wasn't the Viking helmet one. You did all right. All right, it's a tie between Dylan and Discord. Congrats to everyone in Discord who brought that together, your combined brain power.
No, I didn't know that was the final
Vedius. Because you only got 2, Vedi. You lost to Discord and Dylan Falco. Dylan Falco, fair. Discord, a little embarrassing. Of course, we are closing out round 1 with a battle between the 2nd and 3rd place teams as Mad Lions and Rogue take to the stage.
It's going to a slight by Xayah gets it! And you have to feel that's the end for G2. And with a commanding performance, Mad Lions will take the win.
But they have to turn this, they have to damage. But no, the CC comes in, it's clutch. They turn right back! That was clean, the turn from Arma.
We're going into playoffs as a team. I'm feeling very confident about it. And I think that we are gonna prove that we are one of the best teams in EU.
Oduwamne coming in, that's the Meganar. 3 into wall. Fnatic don't see it coming, but Oduwamne digging graves with the Fnatic faithful. That's the triple. Looking to make the difference as Trippy's in the midst of it, everything, and Larson is just throwing down damage left and right. Moonstone be damned.
This is definitely the best chance we have at lifting the trophy. But my expectation is definitely to win. That's the only thing that matters. I don't really care how far we reach, I just want to win.
Both of those teams, of course, rising to fame in 2020 with top 2 finishes in the summer regular season, earning their spot at Worlds. This has been for a long time a bit of a growing rivalry in the LEC, but Rogue, it feels like this season have taken the next step. Before we look at today, though, Vedius, run us through a little bit of the history here between these 2 teams.
Yeah, so what's interesting is last year when the Splice rebranded to Mad, they introduced a lot of new young players into the roster, with Humanoid being the benchmark, and there were a lot of question marks. Obviously, a lot of us were very excited because there were a lot of new players. There was a lot of hype from EU Masters as well with the introduction of Kazi and Xayah, and I think that they actually had a very successful year overall. They were able to take G2 out in a best of 5, and they were able to finish top 3. And then they moved into Summer Split where they didn't have the same level of performance, but they actually matched up against Rogue in the lower bracket when they ended up getting clean sweep 3-0. Overall, though, I think for a group of rookies qualifying for Worlds, getting that experience, I think they're pretty happy with their progression. And Rogue kind of followed a similar trend where they also changed up the roster just a little bit. They continued to make progress during the regular season, and they only got better from strength to strength, actually taking G2 all the way to 5 games in the best of 5s in the Summer Split. So you can see how both organizations kind of taking that investment and over the years have kind of been building off of their key parts. And now they're kind of at a point with both rosters where you have their core carries, you have good support structure that exists around them as well. And I think that now you're looking at 2 orgs that, again, are continuing to fight for those top spots. But it feels like right now, and over the last year, Rogue has kind of had that slight edge over the Mad Lions.
Yeah, Dylan, I would be curious to get your opinion on the split so far for both of these teams. Obviously, first playoff series, a lot can change in those 2 weeks, but looking at the regular season, what's your read on these 2 lineups?
I think that Rogue, in particular, has had a much more strong and consistent regular season. I think Mad Lions simply have just made too many mistakes, I think, mid and late game to close out some of the advantages that they have. To me, to truly think that they're one of the top teams in Europe right now. So I definitely have to give Rogue the edge as of right now, but I definitely see the talent on Mad Lions. I think if Karzi's having a good game, or if Xayah is also able to perform well, I think they can be very strong too.
And that's something that we just have to keep our eyes on, right? Because Mad, again, 2 weeks, a lot can shift, but we saw the last time these 2 teams played, it was a bit of a question mark. Overall, though, as there are a lot of questions on stage, we've got some rookies playing today. It's always interesting to hear what the team has to say. So I do want to shift our attention over to an interview that we had earlier in the day with Mac, courtesy of Laure, as Mad Lions have once again finished in the top 3 in the regular season. But let's get some insight from him on today's matchup.
Thanks, Drakos, and thanks, Mac, for joining me today. I want to follow up on what Reckless said yesterday when we had an interview, because I had to talk about the incredible matchup we're going to have today. And he told me that Mad Lions look scarier than we could think. And I mean, it's a true representation of what we've seen from you guys during the second half of the season with a very impressive early game stat. But how do you think it's going to translate into a best of 5 scenario today?
I didn't actually realize he'd said that, so thank you, I suppose. I think it's kind of like the result of what's happened in the second half of the split, which is that I think this spring we've put a much higher emphasis on a kind of long-term mindset in terms of development. Whereas last year, when we first came into the league, we specialized really heavily around one specific playstyle and got really good at it. And then in playoffs, we were like kind of an open book, and Fnatic and G2 just took us apart. And that's something that I really wanted to avoid this year. So the whole philosophy that we've come in, even from the way that we train, the way that we think and talk about picks, the way that we draft, and the way that we built our roster was about being able to adapt. So hopefully that long-term strategy pays off during the playoffs, and hopefully that means that we can capitalize on the good early games that we're having, because I think we're a really strong early game team. And that's also been a big part of what we've been working on this year, is transitioning some of that early game, because we've had some games where like we've we've lost games that we really shouldn't have lost, but that's fine. Our mentality during that whole period was, okay, we're playing comps that are difficult to execute. Okay, we're trying to snowball really hard. And these are comps that I think last year's Mad Lions in spring would never have played and would never have looked good on. So I'm happy with that. I think overall, fingers crossed it translates into playoffs. The overall hope is that it ends up with us being a stronger and more adaptable Mad Lions.
It's super interesting, the fact that you focused on having many different strategies, because it makes things even more interesting in a best-of-5 scenario. And I remember when you faced Rogue during the regular season, it was a pretty close game. Can we expect something similar today in a best-of-5?
I hope so. I mean, that game was really close. It came down to the hero 3 HP Aatrox, right? Hopefully that doesn't happen again today. But yeah, I think you can expect to see us. I mean, we're feeling really confident, right? So I think you can expect to see us coming in, playing our style and being bold. We're feeling super confident. I think we have achieved to a certain degree that aim of being quite an adaptable, variable team, which hopefully means that during playoffs we'll be able to adapt more to specific opponents. So assuming we have the right read on Rogue, then we should be able to attack Rogue, and hopefully that will transition onto later stages of the playoffs as well.
All right, quick words on Rogue before I let you go. Your take on them as a team, their success, and what we can expect from them in a best-of-5, because they have a lot of experienced players, but they also have Trinity in the bot lane, who's fairly new.
I don't want to give away too much, but I think today will come down. I think it's a really interesting game to watch for the jungle matchup with Xayah versus Inspired, because I think that both of those players are extremely pivotal, and Xayah has been a player that's been extremely pivotal in a lot of our early game success. He's definitely a big part of kind of coordinating our early game offensive strategies and planning ahead. So he's fulfilling that niche really well, and seeing how he matches up versus Inspired will be really interesting today.
I can't wait. Yeah, eyes on the jungle, guys. But Mac, thank you so much for the interview. Best of luck today against Rogue. We'll see you maybe after the best-of-5 series. And back to you guys.
Maybe after the best-of-5 series. I like it, Laure. We'll see. We're going to find out what happens. It's going to be a crazy series, most certainly. But of course, one thing that we do have to check on, other than just the jungle matchup, is the last time these teams went head-to-head. You heard Mac talk about it, a very close game. But I'd love to get your thoughts on that previous matchup. It felt like it showed us a lot, a bit of a preview of what we can expect today. Dylan, thoughts on the draft first before we kicked off? The bit of the style that Mad Lions are going here, the Ahri that we mentioned earlier. What was your impression?
So this was actually a few patches ago, right? I think this was a patch where Udyr first pick was incredibly strong. And I think in this draft, Rogue's mid-jungle, Udyr Orianna, was much, much, much stronger than Ahri Lilia. Both AP damage, both very high cleanse value, very high Merc Treads value. So I think that as the game went longer in this game, Rogue was always going to have the advantage. And Mad Lions simply weren't able to snowball enough, I think, to overcome that.
What I think was impressive to me was how Mad Lions, using this draft, was able to find the early leads that they did. And when we looked back at the game, we're going to look at some replays, like they actually found a lot of favorable skirmishes. They were able to punish a lot of the small mistakes that Inspired was making. And I think that this comes back to what Mac was saying, and something we're going to talk a lot about. Like, the junglers are super important in this matchup. And I think that Xayah takes such smart pathing where he can match and find these early game advantages for his team. And with a comp like this, what was really cool is when we bring up the first replay, what you'll notice is there was a very small window where Mad Lions actually have mid lane priority, which they use to then collapse onto Inspired. So his whole game plan is, hey, my bot has pushed. You can see Thresh is already in the river. Orianna's looking to push in the wave. And so his whole game plan is to play towards that bot Scuttle Crab. And they even take a favorable trade. But because of this slight swing in mid lane, it actually ends up going overall in the favor of Mad.
And I think when you look back at this game, right, it's crazy to see how a single mistake, in this case from Inspired, and you can see maybe initially why he makes the play. He feels like his bot lane has priority, but a bad trade counts against him, has a level advantage, but humanoid roaming first, how much a little difference like this can make in the early game, because at the end of this play, as we're going to roll this out, LEC is sitting pretty. A guy that we're already keeping on in a very tight jungle matchup to try to find leads. This is such a powerful, such a good start for him. He grabs one kill. Eventually, as this clip rolls out, you'll see him grab a second. And it's interesting to me because Mad Lions getting the early game lead is not something that is something that we're very used to seeing.
Yeah.
This has been something the team has always been good at. In this case, it comes from Inspired. Yes, maybe overstepping, but here in the mid game, even after a very stalled out, they're able to get the Ocean Soul. And what's incredible to me, Dylan, is that despite this, despite an Ocean Soul, despite what appears to be like a pretty even game where Mad are finding these big moments and finding this major objective, it's still Rogue coming out on top, punishing Mad Lions. What is your read on this and how it applies to the series?
So obviously the Ocean Soul in this game was a massive advantage, but I do think Rogue here does have a better teamfight comp when it goes into the late game. And as Max said, there was a 3 HP Aatrox in this final teamfight we're seeing on the screen right now, and it was really on a knife's edge. This could have gone either way. And
I think obviously Vedius, these are not the circumstances that you necessarily plan for. Right?
Yeah.
When you queue up into a game, these are not the mid-late game situations that you come in preparing for. But I think it is something to the credit of Rogue that they have been able to they match a lot of the mid-game plays that come in from Mad Lions in this one. They stay even in the gold overall, and then all it takes is for Mad Lions to slip up once, and in this case have a composition that, as you mentioned, Dylan, that can scale pretty comfortably in the late game to just come out on top.
I think that the point you made before even coming to this was this game was like a really great representation of these two teams playing against each other, right? Like, I think that what we've seen from Mad a lot this split is quite difficult to execute comps, where actually multiple times they've been able to get early game leads where you could argue maybe they shouldn't have, but then they make one mistake, and then because of the nature of their comp, it becomes very difficult for them to come back. And sometimes that is just what happens, and I respect them for trying these comps, because again, they are very difficult to execute, and if you snowball well, they're very effective. But when you're playing against a team like Rogue and other like strong teams, like even if you play a team like Schalke, when you draft a stronger scaling teamfighting comp, all you're waiting for is that one team fight. So you're just waiting for that one opportunity, and you just need an engaged player to find it, and they're able to turn things around. So that's going to be my biggest question mark coming in today. Will Mad continue with this style of, we're going to pick a harder to execute comp, which we can get early game leads in, but we trust in our execution? Or are they going to shift? Are we going to see more of a team fight front to back standard meta style from the team?
But I think that Rogue actually were playing a lot of these team compositions early in the split.
That's true.
A lot of their early games had a lot of Jace top, had a lot of Lucian, Lilia mid jungle. And it was only towards those later games that they shifted more towards late game style.
I agree.
And it's something to watch. The last thing that I want to shift our attention to before I get predictions from both of you is the jungle matchup.
Yeah.
You heard them talk about it. I think we need to talk about it as well, because while Inspired feels like the #1 jungler in the league right now, Xayah has been a rising star. Dylan, I'd love to get your read on his performance so far in the season.
What I find super interesting about Xayah is in this carry farm jungle meta, I think he's been probably the best jungler in Europe to utilize these champions like Graves and Italy when they were meta. Whereas some of the other top teams junglers still opted towards more Jarvan, more Udyr, some of these other more tanky junglers. And I think that's really impressive from a rookie player to be the carry focus of his entire team and control the early game, get up 100 CS, get up 2 levels, 3 levels. And I'm very interested to see if he can do this like on stage, in a stage setting.
I'm curious, Dylan, like, do you think that these are the two best junglers in Europe right now?
I think in the regular season, these were the 2 best junglers, yes.
Yeah. So like that's pretty high praise when you think about it. This is his first split on the LEC. This is going to be his first stage game, I think, ever, considering like the guy is actually very new to pro play. Like he only started out last year during the pandemic. And so like it's going to be exciting to see how he incorporates himself, because there are a lot of question marks of how Mad last year would do, and was their success due to the fact that we moved to online play. Like a lot of question marks still surround what it's going to be like for this team on the stage.
And not only that, the meta has shifted a bit, right? You see Volibear jungle now, you see Udyr tank, Hecarim tank. The Nidalees and the Graves are a bit less common, and I'm interested to see if Xayah will still look towards these champions, or if he will embrace kind of the newer tank jungles that we've been seeing a lot.
It's a lot of questions. Not a whole lot of time for answers. We're going to have to leave some of them to the caster desk, some of them to the game ahead of us. With 15 seconds left, I need some rapid-fire predictions. I can already tell you, Discord 3-0 for Rogue. No faith in Xayah or Mad Lions up in the LEC Discord. I got to know from you, Vedius, first. What are you predicting?
I'm going to predict the 3-1 for Rogue. Right now, their consistency is what I weigh more heavily in favor for them.
Yeah, 3-1 as well.
There you go. 3-1, 3-1, 3-0. Let's see what the casting desk has to say about the matchup ahead of us. The winner of today's series, of course, moving on to challenge G2 for a spot in the final. So let's see who comes out on top.